I'm Farah and Nazarali. I am a yoga instructor, conflict resolution coach, and I am delighted to be here in conversation and in dialogue with Anna Dobos. She's a clinical counselor and also a yoga instructor. She's also an expressive movement facilitator. She works out of Vancouver, and she's just completed a book called Relationship Matters: The Groundwork for Conscious Relationships. I'm so excited about having a dialogue with you, Anna, because relationships are like the stuff of life.
They are, Farah, and thank you so much for this conversation. I'm also very excited. Yeah, relationships are the very seed of our existence. We are human beings, and we are social creatures.
You know, I really like that in the book you talk about, you define, and I think it's important, some very important terms, interdependency versus codependency, and the difference between what it means to be in relationship in an interdependent way versus a codependent way. Can we start off there?
Yeah, I think it's a great start, because we live in a disconnected society. So there is a common belief, at least in Western society, that we need to be super independent. And being independent is doing everything on our own. And if we don't do that, it's the sign of weakness or the sign of failure. And we don't recognize that as human beings, we are interconnected. This is our nature. And what that means that we our basic need is an emotional connectedness. So it's not only that we can count on each other, so that you can help me if I'm in trouble or whatever, but that we belong, that there's a strong, almost like a web, connection web emotionally. And when we grow up as kids, our very basic need, according to John Bowlby, who talks about attachment theory, is to feel emotionally connected. Emotional isolation is traumatizing. When we are not accepted, when we are not supported, when we are not loved for who we are, for our authentic nature. So going back to your question, what the difference is between codependency and interdependency. Interdependency is a healthy way of relating when we feel emotionally safe within, and we feel emotionally safe and connected with others, and we rely emotionally, we are safe to rely on others. And codependency comes from childhood woundedness, when the fear of not being accepted, the pain of not being seen and heard and recognized as an individual is so strong that a child starts altering themselves to be accepted. Someone who's codependent gives up their authentic self in order to somehow get that attachment, to get that acceptance that they need.
Would you say that people pleasing is one facet of codependency?
Um,
One expression of codependency? Because I imagine there are many different ways that it expresses itself.
yes. So again, going back to childhood, when anxious or avoidant attachment develops instead of secure attachment, codependency develops as well. We develop different coping strategies how to connect with someone. So if the story, what we receive in childhood, is that if I please the other person, that's when I'm accepted. If I do everything the way you want me to do, then you will connect with me. So instead of being authentic, I will run my life as a people pleaser. Of course, I point out in the book, and I always tell my clients as well, underneath the people pleaser tendency or pattern, there is our greatest strength. So a people pleaser is probably a caring and loving and empathetic and compassionate person by nature. So there's the strength, but it tips over and it becomes dysfunctional as the intention is different. So instead of genuine caring and loving, the real intention is to earn acceptance and love. And that's how it becomes codependent. So yes, people pleaser tendency is one expression of codependency.
You've mentioned childhood experiences many, many times so far, and I like that the first chapter in your book is all about unlearning, unlearning ways that we have been conditioned to behave, unlearning ways, reflecting on our ways of thinking and behaving and relating and how they've been shaped by childhood experiences. Are there any other things that come to mind or any examples you have of some things that you've unlearned or some things that your clients have unlearned in their quest to really be authentic?
Well, unlearning and relearning something is not easy. Our brain is wired in a certain way, so the patterns that we bring, they're very, very strong, and as a result, we react instead of responding in different situations. So I can bring personal examples. I'm a recovering people pleaser myself, and unlearning this pattern is very uncomfortable, because when we carry a pattern, which, like we mentioned, people pleasing, but it can be victim or a controller or a hyper rational, they're all, like, human beings are so creative, so we have many patterns that we can create. But unlearning the stories that we carry and the patterns that we carry is extremely uncomfortable, because there's almost a programming that's running the show, but driving the bus. So what I find that's the most important, and I think that's the most important message of the book as well, that self-awareness, learning, deepening self-awareness in our life, that's one of the most important things we can do. Because by learning self-awareness, that's how we recognize that, okay, I feel the distress in my body, I feel the fear that leads my action, and then by deepening self-awareness, at one point it's possible to stop our behavior. Instead of acting out, there's a way to stop it, and that's when something new can be learned. And so it's not an easy process, but it's a crucial one,
You
for
know,
sure.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who's an expert in trauma, and I remember he said, and I've never forgotten, because when something resonates as truth, and then you have a visceral memory of it. And he said, the brain is a predictability machine. And I often think about the difference between brain and consciousness, which I think is what you're talking about when you talk about self-awareness, and how powerful it is that you bring all these somatic elements into the work you do as a clinical counselor, because I find that conscious movement is also a really fantastic way to build self-awareness. Can you speak a little bit about some of the work that you do in expressive movement and yoga?
Somatic work, working with the body and movement, it's and I already have the awareness that I close my eyes when I started talking about movement. And that's a nice awareness, because working with the body and listening to where the body wants to take you in the movement, and I don't have words because interestingly, I sank into my body from my brain. So that's what happens. That's what happens in my workshops or retreats, that we leave the cognitive functions behind and we move. And as we move, sensations, feelings, there are going to be all kind of sensations in the body, that if we become aware of it and we move with it, then first of all we can explore all that imprint, all those patterns in on the bodily fat level, and we can work through those. And later on, when we introduce something different, something new, something healthier, then we can experiment what that feels like, what it is like to move from a different mindset, from a different inner space.
So, I mean, I think about, a lot of people that I coach really desire to communicate in a more empowered way. And so I think that what you're talking about is a felt sense of moving and feeling in the body. Like, what does it feel like to be empowered? How does it feel to speak from a place of being empowered and courageous, and that you are able to speak what is true for you? And it's not
Exactly.
the cognitive thing.
Exactly, and that's one of the processes we usually go through to find where empowerment is, what it feels like, what it is like in your arms, in your chest, in your what kind of posture you invite when you feel empowered and courageous compared to when you feel little and insignificant, and how do you move with that, and which I find beautiful, how you interact, how you connect with another human being through movement. And when people go through this process and they have new experiences, what it is like to connect through movement, from, let's say, from empowerment, then it sinks in. So you asked me about previously, about relearning, like unlearning and relearning. Well, that's the process that I do with myself and others. We need to have a bodily felt experience of the new when we learn something new. It's not enough just to read about it, even though it's a great book to read, but there's more work to be done.
In the second chapter, after unlearning and relearning, there's an examination of the roles that we play. And you give the example of your own relationship. And I'd love to hear a story just that exemplifies sometimes the roles that we play in relationship that we're not even aware that we're playing.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly which story you are referring to. Again, I like bringing personal examples because I I also want to show that what I'm talking about, it comes from my own experience as well. So not just as a therapist working with others, because of course that's a that's just a magical space. I know that in my life I had been able to function really well in society with my friends, going at my workplace, but it was always my romantic relationships where those old patterns, the real belief about myself kicked in. So watching myself becoming submissive, giving my power away, being scared of not being accepted. Um, as a result, for example, I ended up in an abusive relationship, and it was a painful journey to get out of that. But relationships offer this beautiful space for learning. The title of the book is Groundwork for Conscious Relationships. Normally, if we had like a beautiful, supportive, loving, accepting family, we would receive that groundwork in childhood. If we don't, self-awareness is the way out of old patterns, and relationship. offer this space where you can recognize, we can recognize those crazy roles that we believe that we have to carry.
You know, I know from my own experience, one pattern that my husband and I were getting into was a role of parent and child. And we, at one point in our relationship, we actually decided to live together as individuals and not as a couple so that we could learn how to relate to one another as adults. And I found that so interesting, the framework that you bring in from, I think, Eric Byrne, about how to relate adult to adult versus relating adult to child or parent to child. And it was so, I'd never heard of that before. So it really brought clarity to a past dynamic that was in our relationship that we had to work through. And speaks to, I think, also sometimes you work through a pattern, but a stressor can activate it again. Or if you're very unresourced, it can be very easy to fall back into patterns. Can you speak a little bit about that in terms of the roles we play, like the role of external stressors or events that kind of can um, trigger an old brain state, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, well, the way I see life, and that's my belief or perception, is that we are constantly challenged. Yeah, so many times we find that, oh, okay, I was able to overcome this. I'm different. I'm not reactive anymore. I don't react but respond. I can really nicely manage situations, and I'm more authentic. And then a big challenge comes, and I think that as long as we are alive, we are getting those challenges. Why? I think because we are going towards being more present, being that's the learning process, to be present, to be conscious, to be self-aware, and to liberate ourselves from all those beliefs and games of the ego. So yeah, I totally agree with you that we will receive new and new challenges. And most of the time, like I think it was Ram Dass who talked about how he went to India, and he was all like, enlightened. He worked on himself, and then he came back and visited his parents. And then all of a sudden he didn't feel so enlightened anymore. There were the triggers. So yeah, it's a beautiful journey.
Gosh, intimate partnerships and family relationships are full of opportunities, really, to grow, definitely, and learn who we are and evolve consciously, for sure. I like that you talk a little bit about the relationship dance. I think when I think of dancing with someone in a partnered way, there's both your own dance and paying attention to how someone else is moving. And there's room for both. Just in the same way interdependent allows for autonomy as well as a sense of belonging and connection. In a relationship dance, what have you learned about what that looks like, what it feels like, the process of dancing in relationship?
The relationship dance, why relationships offer this amazing opportunity to evolve. Well, because you're not alone. So the way your partner reacts or responds or acts, I should say, acts in a situation. So let's look at an example. let's say I'm sitting at home and my partner comes home and he's angry. So he's acting in a certain way, and I might think that his anger, like he is angry, so I have nothing to do with this, but his anger will generate probably some emotions within. So if we are in a conflict or we are in any interaction, there's the behavior of the other person, and then there are the emotional responses that I have as I receive the other person's actions or behavior. I want to point out that we usually use the language, you make me feel this way. The other person does something and I have emotions as a result of the other person's behavior. And I believe that the other person made me feel this way. And that's what I talk about in the book, that no one ever makes you feel in a certain way. As a result of the other person's behavior, I have emotions, and those emotions, again, that's all about self-awareness. Why do I have those emotions? Patterns are coming alive, and beliefs coming alive as the result of the other person's behavior.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I think in conflict resolution, I often coach clients and I talk about depersonalizing, depersonalizing conflict. So sometimes when somebody projects negative emotions like anger, we assume that we're the cause of that. And in fact, the anger that a person is projecting may have nothing to do with us, and probably we're not the cause of it. So when we're able to kind of depersonalize it, it takes the pressure off, and then we can get curious about, hey, what's going on for you? And I know you talk about curiosity a lot in your book.
I do, and I think that's the answer. Being curious and being the ally of the other person. It's extremely difficult to do, because if if my partner is angry and I get triggered and I get defensive, it is extremely difficult to get curious about what's going on for me and what's going on for him. That's why I offer this idea that becoming the ally, real partner of the with my loved one in this exploration, that's the most beautiful intimacy project we can do. But of course, two people need to create that really safe emotional space, that it is okay to get curious, that, hey, what's going on for you? What are the real emotions, and what is the story that you're making up in this situation?
Yeah, that's why I like the term relationship dance, because it does take two. It does take two to be curious, step out of our past. And I often think you're stepping into a space that's unknown, and you don't know where the resolution is. That's what makes it magical, is that there's no destination. You step in, like real curiosity doesn't have um, a destination, and I think that's really hard for people to get into that mindset of like not knowing. And it's a practiced mindset. I found that I learned to practice curiosity, and it's a skill and a mindset that you get used to and comfortable with and have to practice.
And it's scary. It's scary because if I get curious, then I'm not protecting myself. That's the basic idea in conflicts, that people get protective. Even a victim mindset, that, oh my God, how can you do this? Like, even that is a protective pattern. As soon as you get curious, there's instead of getting closed off and creating walls and distance, With curiosity, what you do, you step closer and you open the door. It takes courage. It takes real courage to recognize that maybe this defensive who wins and who's right and who's wrong type of mindset can only create pain. And without bringing politics into this conversation, the reason I find this mindset shift so crucial is because if I become defenseless and get curious and open to get to know myself and then offer that to my partner and my children, and if I'm able to create this more conscious, more open and curious and this exploration with my loved one, then we can create that in our little community. And then as a chain reaction, I believe that that's what countries need, because the stories we carry as individuals and we are married to stories and beliefs, and we want to be protective of those. That's what happens on the political level as well. And I don't want to take that direction in this conversation, obviously.
I think what you're trying to say is that the work that we do at an individual level has ripple effects on a greater level.
Exactly. And the war we experience within, like just think of the torture that a person can go through when they feel unworthy, or they have this belief that I'm not good enough, I have to achieve, I like all that rumination. That inner environment is not peaceful. It's not peaceful. The work within and the work within the primary relationships has a ripple effect for sure.
As you're talking about curiosity and openness, I really think a lot about the work of Brene Brown and vulnerability and, what it means, the preciousness and the opportunity that vulnerability can create in some situations to really shift a relationship. And do you have anything that you want to say about vulnerability or?
I would love to, yes. Yeah, because since Brené Brown, we have a different view on vulnerability, like a more positive one. But vulnerability is still, I think, regarded as some kind of weakness. When in fact, what does vulnerability really mean? I think what vulnerability means is that I show myself. So instead of hiding and pretending and acting somehow that it will cover, put a spacesuit on somehow so the other person doesn't have access to how I really am. With vulnerability, you are transparent. Here I am. This is how I feel. This is what's going on for me. What is more courageous? I think this is the strongest expression of a human being to be naked and show themselves. So I think that vulnerability is the only way to each other. And interestingly, when we meet someone and we fall in love, we are vulnerable. That's how like we fall into this big container of this love, and all of a sudden like we are one and we connect, and there's this beautiful experience, and then we start hiding as we feel that we start playing the roles, the patterns, the beliefs, this relationship dance and whatever. People start hiding, and then very soon personalities interact and roles are being acted out. The groundwork is to unlearn and then relearn vulnerability, to be like children like conscious children, because of course um, children are not necessarily so self-aware, but have this openness and vulnerability.
And when I teach conflict resolution, I often talk about the distinction between assertiveness and aggression. That aggression carries emotional imprint, and assertiveness is a statement that values who you are and what's important to you. So it's interesting. I like how you define that. You
And
know,
just I would like to add one more thing, because you're making a great point. When I'm assertive and when I set my boundaries in this defenseless way, then actually it's loving to me and loving to you, because when I am myself and assertive and talk about my needs and my feelings, and then that's the most loving action I can do to you as well. Either so first of all, because you are not going to wonder what's going on for me, and you might receive, through my boundary, you might receive a feedback that, and we were talking about the relationship dance, that might generate something within you that you can reflect on. So this
yes.
vulnerability, defenselessness, and assertive communication, curiosity, and those are the, I would say, the elements of that alliance that I would really like to support in couples.
So I know we could have this conversation for many hours, but I also know that we have to bring this conversation to a close. So I suspect that the book is just um, the first part of deeper work that happens, that continues maybe in other formats. I suspect that, you know, a lot of learning happens in person, in group. Can you speak a little bit about the work that you do in person and with others, and in those kinds of settings where these learnings really come alive?
Yeah, and thank you for this question, because it's true that reading the book, it gives a general direction, and of course it has a very practical tools that I offer. But as we mentioned, unlearning and relearning, it is a process. I have courses that I offer individuals and couples. I have a 6 weeks long basic course and then an advanced one, where based on the book, we take these steps together, either in individual couple sessions or in groups. um, and then, of course, there are the summer retreats that I offer when people want to go on a deeper level and experience connection and themselves on a body felt level. So yes, there is a whole program that I offer based on the book. And initially, I wanted to invite those couples who are entering a committed relationship, because the patterns we carry that we bring from our childhood, that's what we pass on to our children. And people fall in love, get married, and there's no course, no preparation for how to be in a relationship. So that was my primary intention, to offer something for those who would like to learn about how to connect differently and how to be more conscious in relationships. But of course, I welcome everyone who's entering a committed relationship, who's running away from one, or who's in one and want to, do a better job.
It's been really wonderful to be in conversation with you, Anna, to talk about these things that are an important part of our lives. And probably, I'm sure, many people who are listening or watching can relate to the examples and the things that we've been talking about. So thank you so much. It's been really lovely to have this important conversation.
Thank you, Farah, so much. Thank you.